Hi there, today I'm going to show you the Populate terrain plugin. So basically it helps us create new meshes, so similar to what a quantify mesh modifier would do, but we have a lot more control over it and a lot more sort of cleaner outcome. So just to show the quantify mesh, obviously that's quite an easy one because it's a square, but if we were to do it on a bit of a more complex shape, we have all sorts of crazy stuff happening here. So if we wanted to use that as a greeble or some other modifiers, we'd have a bit of an issue with these sort of shapes in here to create a realistic urban form or whatever we're working on. So I'll just delete those. Basically, there's sort of two ways you can tackle something with the Populate terrain, but basically it gives us a preview of the grid and we can customize that to what we want with rows and columns and the XY axis, or we can go for an approximate square there. And what that does is creates the mesh, so we process that and then that's what we'll have there. So obviously we would want to rotate this because we don't want shapes like this happening on the edges, and also we want a nice clean mesh. So we'll delete that, and what the trick is to rotate and just match that up a bit better with the grid, and let's make a nice one there. So as you can see, a lot cleaner result there, and that can be said as well for a more complex shape, so we can kind of rotate to what we want. And let's do a bit of a mesh like this, and then so as you can see, it's a lot more manageable than the quantify mesh. So if we're going to put a greeble or something on this, we'd have a much better, more sort of realistic outcome. Let's have a look at that. So yeah, rather than having those real narrow edges that create real thin sort of buildings, like there is a little bit of it happening here, but we can sort of go back later and edit poly and sort of delete those and redraw some where the gaps are. But basically with the Populate terrain, there's sort of a quick way you can do it, and that would be to attach some of these splines together, and considering they're on the same axis, it makes sense to kind of tick a few off together. So if we attach just a number of these here, we can do a quantify mesh in sort of one go for them. So I would rotate. That's the wrong one. Yeah, would rotate that nice and straight. Get the grid up to make sure that's a bit better. And we'll get a preview grid in there. So basically the point of doing them in a group is that you can do it a lot quicker, but the risk is that because it's sharing the same grid, you're going to have some narrow face polygons here. So if I was to process that, the outcome will show. I'll just put on shaded so we can see. So this is the outcome of the Populate terrain. You're going to have some very narrow business happening here, so I would recommend taking it one by one, even though it's a little bit tedious. You're going to have a far better outcome than doing it all at once. So what I'm saying is we can process that, and then you don't have those real narrow edges like we have here. Instead we'll have a nice clean mesh like these ones. So just to show you, if we were to put a greeble here, we're going to have some very narrow buildings on the edges, whereas if we put a greeble on this cleaner one that we've taken time to rotate and do on its own, you've got a perfect shape there. So I'll show you. There we go. So that's the sort of the difference that you'll get. A lot of these narrow ones, which can often come sort of half complete as well, they get sort of trimmed off like this sort of business, whereas this one's a far more even spread. So That's very helpful in if you want to create an urban form using Greeble or any other modifier. Taking the time to do a populate terrain can be very useful for a far better outcome. Thank you for watching.